The doors of Durin stood closed against the night, their mithril inlay catching moonlight like captured stars. Beautiful, ancient, wrong. Gandalf the Grey placed his palm against the stone and felt it immediately. The absence where presence should be. Moria had always hummed with deep earth song, the resonance of dwarven civilization carved into living rock. Now there was only silence. The silence of tombs, the silence of things that should be dead but aren't. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. "Aye," Gimli agreed, though his voice carried the forced cheer of someone refusing to acknowledge dread. "The doors are closed, probably just sleeping. We'll wake them with the proper greeting and they'll—" "No!" Gandalf's voice was sharp. "Listen." The Fellowship listened. The wind carried sound across the black water of the lake. Not the industrial clamor of a working mine, not the songs or forge hammer rhythms that should echo from any dwarven hold. Just silence. And underneath it, if you knew how to listen, something else. A wet, organic sound, like breathing but not from any throat that should exist in Arda. Boromir's hand went to his sword instinctively. "What dwells here now?" "I do not know," Gandalf admitted, and those 4 words carried more weight than any lecture. Gandalf knew things, ancient things, dark things, things that had names in languages older than mountains. When he said he didn't know, it meant they were standing at the edge of something new, something that shouldn't exist. Frodo felt the ring pulse against his chest, not with eagerness or hunger, but with something that might have been recognition or warning. The ring had been forged to dominate wills, to corrupt minds, to bend the world to Sauron's design. But what the ring sensed beyond these doors had no will to dominate, no mind to corrupt, just appetite. "The password," Gimli was saying, stepping forward to the door. "Speak, friend, and enter. Melon." The word was honey-warm in his mouth, full of hope and homecoming. The doors began to open, but wrong, too slow, grinding against something. The ancient mechanisms protesting weight they weren't designed to move. The gap between the doors widened inch by inch, and from that gap came a smell that made Legolas's elven nose wrinkle in disgust. Decay, ammonia, something organic and alien. And then they saw it. The resin, coating the inside of the doors like crystallized honey, but darker, harder, architectural in its deliberate formation. It glistened in the moonlight, translucent enough to see shapes trapped within. Metal, bone, armor twisted and reformed by something that had no respect for dwarven craftsmanship. "Durin's beard," Gimli whispered. "What is that?" "Nothing that should be here," Aragorn said, his ranger's instincts screaming. He'd tracked every predator in Middle-earth, knew their signs, their territorial markings, their hunting patterns. This was all of those things and none of them. This was something that marked territory not with scent or scratches, but by transforming the environment itself into an extension of its biology. The water behind them exploded. The Watcher in the water erupted from the lake in a geyser of black water and white foam and pure animal terror. The ancient guardian of Moria's western gate came up thrashing, its tentacles flailing without coordination or purpose, just blind panic. And its body was wrong. Half its tentacles were gone, not severed clean, dissolved. Acid had eaten through them at different lengths, leaving cauterized stumps that wept black ichor. Its hide, thick enough to turn spears and resist blades, was covered in chemical burns. Great weeping wounds where something corrosive had splashed it repeatedly over time. The creature's many eyes found the Fellowship, found the open doors beyond them. And in those ancient eyes that had watched the doors since the Second Age, there was no malice, no territorial aggression, just fear. It grabbed for them, not to kill, to prevent. its remaining tentacles wrapped around Sam's waist, around Pippin's leg, trying to pull them away from the doors, trying to drag them anywhere except into Moria. It's trying to save us, Frodo realized with horror. Boromir's sword came down anyway. Soldier's reflexes overriding analysis. The blade bit deep into a tentacle. The Watcher screamed, an ululating cry that echoed across the water and recoiled. As it pulled back, they saw the rest of the damage. Holes in its body, not wounds from weapons, perfectly circular boreholes like something had burrowed into it, through it, used it as a host or a hunting ground or both. The Watcher dove beneath the water and didn't resurface. It was running. Something that had guarded these doors for 3,000 years was fleeing in absolute terror from what lay beyond them. And behind the Fellowship, the doors of Durin opened fully. Darkness poured out like liquid, not the absence of light. Something thicker, something that moved. The resin coating the entrance glistened wet and alive in the moonlight. And from within came sounds that belonged in no mountain. Chittering, clicking, the rustle of chitin on stone. "We should go back," Legolas said. His voice was steady. Elves didn't panic, but his hand was white-knuckled on his bow. "The pass of Caradhras nearly killed us," Gandalf said. "The Gap of Rohan is watched by Saruman's spies. Moria was always the plan. Plans change when the terrain changes." Aragorn stepped closer to the entrance, every ranger instinct screaming at him to run. Whatever wounded the Watcher, whatever made it flee, that's what dwells here now. Boromir examined his sword where it had cut the Watcher. The blade was pitted. Small droplets of something had eaten into the metal. "Its blood is acidic. I've never seen anything like it." "Nor have I," Gandalf admitted. "Not in any bestiary, not in any account of Morgoth's creatures or Sauron's breeding pits." He looked at the Fellowship, his face grave. "What lies ahead is unknown, but what lies behind is certain death. Sauron's forces hunt us. The ring must reach Mordor. We have no choice." Gimli stepped forward, his axe gripped tight. "My cousin Balin came here 30 years ago. 400 dwarves followed him to reclaim our ancestral home. If they're in danger, I'm going in." "Gimli," Aragorn started. "I'm going in," Gimli repeated, "with you or without you." The Fellowship looked at each other. 9 souls, 1 ring, a quest to save Middle-earth from the Dark Lord. And now, an unknown horror that had made the Watcher flee and left acid burns on stone that had stood for 5,000 years. "Together, then," Frodo said quietly. The ring burned against his chest, but he ignored it. "We go together." They entered Moria single file. Gandalf first, his staff bursting into light that seemed swallowed by the darkness rather than illuminating it. The hobbits next, Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, clustered close like children in a thunderstorm. Then Boromir and Aragorn, hands on weapons, warriors taking rear guard. Legolas and Gimli in the middle, elf eyes and dwarf knowledge watching for threats each recognized differently. The resin thickened as they descended the first stairway. It wasn't just near the entrance anymore. It coated the walls now. Thick in some places, thin in others, creating a topographic map of something's movements and territory. The substance was translucent and amber-colored, hardened but clearly organic. Through it they could see shapes, twisted metal, dwarven tools melted and reformed, and bones. So many bones. "What creates this?" Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something that marks territory," Aragorn said. "Predators do it. Wolves with urine, bears with claw marks on trees. This is the same principle, just..." He gestured at the walls. "More architectural." They reached the first landing. The Chamber of Records, Gimli called it. A space where dwarven scribes had once cataloged the mountain's treasures and trade. Now it was a gallery of horror. Bones covered the floor, not scattered by battle or scavengers. Arranged, deliberately positioned in patterns that might have been random or might have been decorative. Dwarven skeletons picked clean, their armor dissolved by acid, their weapons melted into abstract sculptures, and on the walls in the resin more bodies. Not skeletons, corpses, preserved in the amber material like insects in tree sap. Dwarves in various stages of decay, their faces frozen in final expressions of terror or agony or, worst of all, realization. Gimli approached one slowly, his breathing ragged. The dwarf in the resin was young, his beard barely past his chin, his chest was open. Ribs splayed outward from the inside like a grotesque flower. Something had burst out of him. Something large enough to require breaking his sternum and tearing through muscle and skin to escape. "Thrain's boy," Gimli whispered. "I knew him. He was 14 when he left for Moria. He wanted to be a miner like his father." His hand reached toward the resin, stopped an inch away. "What did this to you?" "Something that breeds using hosts," Gandalf said quietly. He was examining another body, this one older, positioned higher on the wall. "Look at the pattern. These aren't random kills, these are deliberate. Something implanted these dwarves with offspring, then positioned them here after emergence." "Why?" Legolas asked. "I don't know. Display, territorial marking, or perhaps..." Gandalf's expression darkened. "Perhaps it's more efficient. Keep the host alive and cocooned. Let the offspring feed internally until maturation. Then preserve the body as part of the hive structure." "The hive?" Boromir's soldier's mind was already cataloging the tactical implications. "You're saying this is a nest?" "I'm saying something transformed this place into breeding grounds. And these..." Gandalf gestured to the cocooned bodies. "These were the raw materials." A sound echoed through the chamber. Not footsteps. Something else. A wet sliding sound, like flesh on stone, coming from multiple directions at once. Aragorn's hand went to Andúril. "We're not alone. We need to move," Gandalf said, quickly, quietly. "Make for the bridge of Khazad-dûm and the eastern gate. 3 days if we're lucky." "And if we're not lucky?" Pippin asked, his voice small. Nobody answered. They didn't need to. The answer was all around them in resin and bone and bodies that had died screaming from the inside out. They pressed deeper into Moria. The dwarven architecture revealed itself in fragments, magnificent pillars carved with the deeds of ancient kings. Vaulted ceilings that soared into darkness, halls that could hold thousands. All of it violated by the organic resin. It grew thicker in some passages, formed curtains in others, created chambers within chambers like a wasp's nest built inside a cathedral. Gimli navigated by memory and family knowledge. But even he was getting disoriented. "This hall should open to the third deep," he muttered. "But the resin is blocking the usual path. We'll have to go around through the..." He stopped. His dwarf eyes, accustomed to darkness, had caught something the others missed. Movement in the shadows, small, fast, scuttling. "Gandalf," he said slowly. "More light." The wizard's staff blazed brighter. The shadows retreated, and they saw the eggs. Dozens of them, leathery oval shapes about 3 feet high, clustered in alcoves and corners like obscene decorations. The surfaces moved gently as if whatever was inside was breathing, or waiting. "Don't touch them," Gandalf commanded. "Don't go near them. These are..." "What are they?" Sam interrupted. "Incubation vessels. Whatever breeds here lays these, and inside..." Gandalf approached one carefully, his staff held high. "Inside is the next generation." The egg nearest him began to open. The top split into 4 petals, peeling back with a wet organic sound. Steam or vapor rose from inside, and within the egg, something moved. something pale and segmented with too many legs and a shape that looked disturbingly like a hand reaching up from the depths. "Back," Gandalf said. "Everyone back, now." But Pippin, curious and foolish and still too young to understand that some curiosities killed, had wandered toward another egg. This one was already opening, had been opening before they arrived, as if it sensed their warmth, their breath, their presence. The facehugger inside tensed like a coiled spring. "Pippin!" Merry shouted. The creature launched. It moved faster than anything that size should move, faster than Legolas could knock an arrow, faster than Aragorn could draw his sword, a pale blur with 8 legs extended and a long segmented tail whipping behind it, and an underside that pulsed with obscene purpose. Pippin screamed, tried to dodge, too slow. Merry tackled him from the side. Both hobbits went down hard, Merry on top, shielding his cousin with his body. The facehugger sailed over them, hit the wall with enough force to crack stone, rebounded with inhuman agility, and oriented midair for a second attack. This time it targeted Merry's exposed back. Boromir's sword intercepted it. The blade came down in a perfect arc, the kind of strike that had been drilled into him since childhood in Gondor's training yards. The facehugger met the edge with a wet crunch and was driven down, pinned to the stone floor. It screamed. The sound was like nothing in Middle-earth, like metal tearing, like horses dying, like human agony compressed and distorted through a throat that had no vocal cords. A sound that came from pure biological imperative being denied. Boromir leaned on his sword, driving the blade through the thing's body completely. It thrashed. Its tail whipped around, caught his arm, left a bleeding welt. Its legs scrabbled for purchase, finger-like appendages grasping at nothing. And then it bled. The acid hit Boromir's blade first. Dwarf-forged steel, folded 100 times, strong enough to cut through orc armor and troll hide. It began to smoke, to bubble, to dissolve like ice in summer heat. Boromir jerked back, releasing the sword. The acid spread, eating through the metal, dripping onto stone that hissed and pitted under its touch. The facehugger's body liquefied itself, acid blood eating through its own corpse, creating a small crater that smoked and reeked of chemicals that shouldn't exist. "Iru's mercy," Aragorn breathed. He'd seen many things in his ranger years. Acid was not new to him. Certain plants and fungi could produce it. But this was different. This was weaponized. This creature had evolved acid blood as a defense mechanism. Kill it and it killed you back. Boromir stared at the remains of his sword. The blade was half gone, the edge eaten away, the metal warped and useless. What in Morgoth's name was that? "Not Morgoth's," Gandalf said again, and his voice carried a tremor of something the Fellowship had never heard from him before. Fear. This is something else. Something that weaponizes its own death. Strike it and you're burned. Impale it and it dissolves your weapon. This is perfect defense. Perfect attack. Perfect... Predator, Aragorn finished. He was studying the dissolved remains from a safe distance. It was trying to attach to Pippin's face. I could see underneath it before Boromir struck. There was a mouth, or an orifice, and it was opening. Trying to... Implantation, Gandalf said quietly. It's a parasitoid. It was trying to implant something inside Pippin. Use him as a host. He looked at the dozens of eggs visible in the flickering staff light. These are its offspring, which means somewhere in Moria there's a parent, a queen. And she's been breeding for 30 years, Gimli said hollowly. Since Balin's expedition, since we lost contact. He looked at the cocooned bodies on the walls, understanding now. They weren't killed. They were used. Every dwarf who came to reclaim Moria became a host for these things. And when they burst free, when they grew, they laid more eggs. and those eggs took more hosts. Exponential growth. "How many?" Boromir asked. He'd retrieved a backup sword from his pack, was checking its edge against his thumb. How many of these things could there be? Gandalf did the math with visible dread. 400 dwarves in the original expedition. If even half were implanted successfully, if each implantation produced one offspring, if those offspring matured and bred. He looked at them. Thousands. There could be thousands in these halls. The Fellowship absorbed that in silence. 9 people. Thousands of creatures with acid blood and perfect predatory instincts. 3 days to the Eastern Gate. "We move quietly," Aragorn said. "We avoid combat, we—" A sound cut him off, from deeper in the chamber, from the shadows beyond Gandalf's staff light. Wet, organic, deliberate. Something was clicking. Sharp appendages on stone, multiple somethings moving closer. "Form up," Aragorn commanded. The Fellowship pressed together back to back, weapons out, eyes scanning the darkness. The clicking stopped. Then the ceiling moved. Legolas saw it first, his elf eyes piercing shadows that confused mortal sight. "Gandalf! Above us!" The wizard raised his staff. The light blazed brighter, driving back darkness, revealing the vaulted ceiling 30 feet overhead, and the xenomorph clinging to it. The creature was massive, 8 feet long from elongated head to barbed tail. Its exoskeleton was black and biomechanical, plates of chitin that looked like they'd been designed by something that understood both biology and engineering. Its head was elongated, eyeless, with a mouth that opened in stages to reveal layers of teeth and a secondary jaw that shot forward on a piston of muscle. It clung to the stone with casual strength, limbs adapted for climbing positioned at impossible angles. And it was watching them. Not with eyes, it had none, but with something else. Thermal vision, maybe, or electromagnetic sensing, or some alien perception that no creature in Middle-earth possessed. "Nobody move," Aragorn whispered. The xenomorph tilted its head. The motion was curious, analytical. It was assessing them, counting, calculating threat levels and attack vectors with a brain that was perfectly designed for hunting. Then it opened its mouth and screamed. The sound echoed through Moria like a war horn, a territorial challenge and a summons. And from a dozen different passages, from chambers and shafts and alcoves, came answering screams. "Run!" Gandalf said. They ran. The xenomorph dropped from the ceiling with enough force to crater the stone floor. It landed in a crouch, biomechanical limbs absorbing the impact, and launched itself after them. The Fellowship sprinted through passages that Gimli barely remembered, through halls transformed by resin into alien landscape, while behind them the clicking of multiple predators grew louder. Closer. Legolas ran backward, knocking arrows by feel, his elf sight tracking the xenomorph's pursuit. He loosed 3 shots in rapid succession. 2 missed. The creature moved with serpentine grace, dodging mid-stride. The third caught it in the shoulder. The arrowhead punched through chitin with a crack. The xenomorph shrieked, but it didn't stop, didn't even slow. The arrow jutted from its shoulder, acid blood hissing where it dripped, and the creature just kept coming. "It didn't even feel it," Legolas shouted. "Keep running!" Aragorn grabbed Frodo's arm, half dragging the hobbit through a narrow passage. Behind them, the xenomorph crashed into the opening. Too wide for it, but the creature didn't stop. It tore at the stone with clawed hands, widening the gap, determined and intelligent and absolutely fixated. They emerged into a larger chamber. "The Hall of Lights," Gimli gasped, where thousands of lanterns had once hung from the ceiling, creating a constellation of dwarf light. Now it was dark except for Gandalf's staff and filled with resin and eggs and the chittering sounds of more xenomorphs converging. "There!" Boromir pointed to a far exit, a stairway leading down to the second deep. They made for it, 50 yards, 40, 30. The xenomorph burst through the passage behind them, no longer constrained by narrow stone, and accelerated with shocking speed, 20 yards. Gandalf spun, planted his staff, and spoke a word of command. Thunder echoed. The stone floor between them and the xenomorph exploded upward in a wall of shattered rock and ancient power. 10 yards. The wall wouldn't hold. They could already hear the xenomorph tearing through it, but it had bought them seconds. They reached the stairway, started down. The steps were steep and ancient and coated with resin that made footing treacherous. Pippin slipped. Sam caught him. They kept moving. Behind them, the stone wall collapsed. The xenomorph emerged, covered in dust but unhurt, and pursued without hesitation. The stairway descended into deeper darkness. Gandalf's light showed them one step ahead, but nothing beyond. They were running blind, trusting Gimli's memory, trusting luck, trusting that the stairs wouldn't end in a collapsed passage or a sealed door or a dead end. The stairs opened into the second deep, a massive natural cavern that the dwarves had only partially worked, leaving much of the raw stone exposed. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like stone teeth. Water trickled somewhere in the darkness, and everywhere, coating every surface, was the resin. This was hive territory, deep hive, where the transformation was complete. They could see the eggs, hundreds of them, clustered in alcoves and arranged along the walls and positioned in the center of the cavern like monuments. And among them, moving with deliberate purpose, were more xenomorphs. Not just one, 5, 6, 8, a dozen. The fellowship froze. To continue forward meant moving through the egg chamber. To retreat meant facing the one behind them. They were trapped between hunter and hive. "Ideas?" Boromir asked. His new sword was drawn. His other hand had found a torch ready to light it. "Anyone," Gandalf was calculating. "Fire. They don't like fire. I could see it in the one's movements. It avoided my staff light when it blazed brightest." "So we burn them?" Sam asked. "We burn a path," Gandalf corrected. "Light your torches. Stay close. I'll clear us passage through the eggs. We make for that archway." He pointed to the far side of the cavern where a dwarven door stood closed but not resin-sealed. "And hope it leads to the third deep. And the xenomorphs?" Aragorn had counted them, 14 visible, probably more in the shadows. "They won't let us pass unopposed." "Then we fight," Gandalf said grimly. "But we fight smart. Blunt weapons when possible, fire when necessary. Avoid the blood at all costs, and stay together. Separated we die, together we survive." He raised his staff, spoke words in Quenya, the high tongue of the elves. Flame erupted from the staff's tip, not the warm yellow of hearth fire, but the bright white of star fire. He swept it across the nearest cluster of eggs. The eggs burst. The facehuggers inside shrieked and died. The flames consumed resin and organic material alike, creating a charred path through the hive. The xenomorphs responded instantly. Territorial shrieking filled the cavern. The creatures converged from all directions, moving on walls and ceiling and floor with equal ease. "Move!" Gandalf commanded. "Now!" The fellowship charged through the burning path, torches held high, weapons ready. The first xenomorph dropped from the ceiling onto Boromir. The warrior raised his shield instinctively. The creature hit it with enough force to dent the steel boss and drive Boromir to one knee. But the shield held, and Boromir rolled with the impact, throwing the xenomorph off him. It landed on its feet, all 4 of them, and prepared to pounce again. Aragorn's torch caught it across the face. The xenomorph recoiled with a shriek of pain or fury. Aragorn pressed the attack, driving it back with flame, and when it was cornered against a resin wall, he struck with Andúril. The blade, reforged from Narsil, the sword that cut the ring from Sauron's hand, bit deep into the xenomorph's skull, cleaved through biomechanical chitin and into the brain beyond. The creature collapsed. Acid blood sprayed from the wound. Aragorn ducked, rolled away, felt droplets hit his cloak and burn through. The xenomorph thrashed once, twice, then went still. "Aim for the head," Aragorn shouted. "Quick kill prevents excessive bleeding." Another xenomorph came at Legolas from the side. The elf's arrows flew too fast to track, 3 in the air before the first hit. All 3 found the creature's head. Narrow target, small brain cavity. But Legolas's aim was perfect even in flickering firelight. The xenomorph stumbled. Its head smoked where the arrows had punched through. It tried to continue, biological imperative overriding damage, but its legs failed and it crashed to the ground, twitching. Gimli didn't bother with precision. When a xenomorph charged him, he met it head-on with his axe swinging in wide arcs. The first blow took off a limb. Acid sprayed. Gimli's beard caught fire. He ignored it, drove forward, and brought his axe down on the creature's elongated skull with all his dwarf strength behind it. The skull cracked like an egg. The xenomorph collapsed. Gimli stomped out his burning beard and bellowed, "Next!" The hobbits formed a defensive cluster around Frodo. Sam had drawn Sting, the elvish blade glowing blue in warning. Merry and Pippin had their swords out, trying to look braver than they felt. A xenomorph approached them low and fast, recognizing smaller prey, easier targets. Sam stepped forward. "You'll not touch Mr. Frodo." He swung Sting in a wild arc. The blade caught the xenomorph across its extending secondary jaw as it shot forward to bite. Elf metal severed the bio-pistol cleanly. Acid blood sprayed. Sam stumbled back, his shirt smoking where droplets hit. Merry grabbed him, pulled him away while Pippin drove his sword into the xenomorph's side. The blade skittered off chitin, found a gap between plates, sank in deep. The creature screamed, thrashed. Its tail whipped around and caught Pippin across the chest, sending the hobbit flying. Frodo watched him fall, watched Sam's shirt dissolve from acid, watched the xenomorph turn toward Merry with murder in its eyeless gaze. The ring whispered, "Use me. Save them. Put me on and become invisible. Escape. Leave them." "No," Frodo said aloud. He charged the xenomorph. Tiny hobbit against 8-foot killing machine. His sword, his mother's sword that he barely knew how to use, was raised in trembling hands. The xenomorph didn't even see him as a threat. It turned its attention back to Merry. Frodo drove his blade into the back of the creature's leg, into the joint where chitin met flesh. The sword sank into the hilt. Acid blood gushed. Frodo jerked back, but not fast enough. The blood hit his arm. He screamed. The pain was instant and absolute and worse than anything he'd experienced except the Morgul blade's touch. But the xenomorph fell. Its leg collapsed under it, and Boromir was there, driving his sword down through its skull, ending it. "Frodo!" Sam scrambled over, cradled the smaller hobbit's burned arm. "Oh, Mr. Frodo, your arm—" "It's fine," Frodo gasped. It wasn't fine. The burn went deep, but they didn't have time for fine. "Keep moving." Gandalf had cleared a path to the archway, burned through eggs and resin and created a corridor of flame that the xenomorphs wouldn't cross. But the fire was dying and there were still more creatures converging. "Go!" Gandalf commanded. "I'll hold them." "Together," Aragorn said firmly. "We go together or not at all." Gandalf looked at him, saw the determination, saw that arguing would waste time they didn't have. "Then we go now." They sprinted for the archway. The xenomorphs pursued but cautiously now, having learned that these prey had teeth. The Fellowship reached the door. Gimli found the mechanism, dwarven engineering, still functional despite decades of neglect. The door ground open. Beyond was a tunnel, narrow, defensible. They piled through. Aragorn and Boromir last, fighting rearguard, driving back xenomorphs with torch and blade. The door began to close, ancient counterweights still working. A xenomorph tried to force through the narrowing gap. Gimli drove his axe into its face. It screamed. Acid blood sprayed the closing door, eating pits in the stone. But the door sealed anyway, tons of rock sliding into place. Silence. The Fellowship collapsed against the tunnel walls, breathing hard, checking wounds. Frodo's arm was wrapped in cloth torn from Aragorn's cloak. Sam's chest bore acid burns that went through his shirt to skin. Boromir's shield was dented and scored. Legolas had a cut across his cheek where a xenomorph's tail had struck. Gimli's beard was singed. Merry had cracked ribs from the tail strike. Pippin was unconscious but breathing. "Is everyone?" Gandalf started. A thud against the door cut him off. Then another. The xenomorphs were trying to break through, smart enough to recognize that prey had escaped, determined enough to try to follow. "They're intelligent," Aragorn said. "Truly intelligent. They learn, adapt. That's not instinct, that's cognition." "And they're everywhere," Legolas added. "I counted at least 30 in that chamber alone." "If there are thousands in Moria, as Gandalf suggested, then we can't fight our way out," Boromir finished. "When we have to avoid them, use stealth. In a mountain they've turned into their hive?" Gimli shook his head. "We're prey in their hunting ground. They know every tunnel, every shaft, every passage. We're blind and they're not." Another thud against the door, this one harder. The stone cracked slightly. "They'll break through eventually," Gandalf said. "That door won't hold forever. We need to move deeper, find another route." "Deeper into the hive?" Sam asked incredulously. "That's madness." "That's survival," Gandalf corrected. "The eastern gate is still 3 days away. We go around the main hive chambers, take the deep roads. The routes the dwarves used for—" "The deep roads go past the lowest levels," Gimli interrupted. "Past where Durin's Bane dwells." "Durin's Bane?" Frodo asked through pain. "The Balrog," Gandalf said quietly. "A demon of the ancient world. It drove the dwarves from Moria centuries ago. Has dwelt in the depths ever since, sleeping and dreaming of fire. So we choose between acid-blooded monsters and an ancient fire demon?" Boromir's laugh was bitter. "Wonderful odds. The Balrog is old," Gandalf said, "and tired. It may not even wake, but these creatures—" He gestured at the door, which thudded again. "These are active, hunting. We face the Balrog or we face thousands of xenomorphs. Choose." "The deep roads," Aragorn said. "We take our chances with one ancient evil rather than face an army of new ones." The Fellowship looked at each other, wounded, exhausted, 3 days from safety, trapped between predators and demons in a mountain that had become a tomb for an entire civilization. "Right then," Sam said, hoisting his pack. "Deep roads it is. Though I'll say this, I miss the Shire more with every step." They moved deeper into Moria, leaving the sealed door and the xenomorphs behind. But they all knew the truth. The creatures would find another way, would hunt them through the mountain, would pursue them until they killed or were killed. In Moria, there were only 2 kinds of creatures now, predators and prey. The Fellowship had just learned which they were. The tunnel descended for 3 hours, spiraling deeper into the mountain's roots where even dwarves had rarely ventured. The air grew warmer, not comfortably so, the kind of warmth that suggested they were approaching something that radiated heat, something that burned. Gimli navigated by instinct and half-remembered stories from his grandfather. "These passages were last used in Durin's time," he explained, his voice echoing off stone walls untouched by resin. "Back when the mithril mines ran deepest, before we delved too greedily and too deep." "And woke the Balrog," Gandalf finished. "Yes, The ultimate hubris of your people, believing that they could control forces they didn't understand. Gimli bristled. We didn't know it was there. You knew something was there. The miners reported heat that melted their tools, rock that screamed when struck. They reported flames and shadows in the deepest tunnels. Your ancestors ignored the warnings because the mithril was worth too much. And now we make the same mistake, Aragorn observed, descending into danger because the alternative is worse. The alternative is certainly worse, Legolas said. He'd been walking backward, arrow knocked, watching their rear. I can still hear them, distant, but following. Everyone stopped, listened, and yes, there it was. Faint clicking, the sound of chitin on stone. The xenomorphs had found another route. Were pursuing through passages parallel to this one, hunting by sound or heat or some sense that Middle-earth had no name for. How far to the deep roads? Boromir asked Gimli. Another hour, maybe less, then 2 days crossing the lower halls to reach the eastern stairway. Can we make it? Gimli looked at the wounded fellowship, at Frodo's burned arm, at Sam's acid-scarred chest, at Pippin, who'd regained consciousness but could barely walk without support. I don't know. They pressed on. The temperature continued rising. Frodo found himself sweating despite the depth. The ring around his neck grew warm, then hot, then burning. He tucked it inside his shirt but could still feel it pulsing against his skin. Sam noticed him flinching. Mr. Frodo, is it the ring? It's reacting to something, Frodo said. Not the xenomorphs. Something else, something... He searched for words. Something it recognizes, something from the ancient times. The Balrog, Gandalf said, both are servants of Morgoth in their own ways. The ring was forged by Sauron, who was Morgoth's greatest lieutenant. The Balrog is a Maya corrupted to Morgoth's service. They recognize each other like old soldiers recognizing old wars. So it's awake? Aragorn's hand went to Andúral's hilt. Aware, at least. Whether it will rouse itself, Gandalf shook his head. We'll know soon enough. They reached the deep roads an hour later. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern that took Gandalf's staff light several seconds to fully illuminate. And when it did, the Fellowship gasped. This was dwarven engineering at its apex, a bridge of stone spanning an abyss whose bottom couldn't be seen. The bridge was perhaps 10 feet wide and perfectly level, without rails or walls extending into darkness on both sides. Along the cavern walls carved into the living rock were stairs and platforms and doorways leading to mining shafts long abandoned. And from below, from the abyss, came heat that distorted the air, and a glow that was red and angry and alive. The Balrog's domain, Gimli whispered. We're directly above it now. Then we cross quickly, Gandalf said. Single file. Watch your footing. Don't look down. They started across, Gandalf leading, the hobbits next. Then Boromir and Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli bringing up the rear. Halfway across, the clicking sounds returned, louder now, closer, and not from behind them, from above. Legolas looked up. His elf eyes pierced the darkness beyond Gandalf's light. What he saw made his bow drop slightly in horror. Gandalf, the ceiling. The wizard raised his staff. The light blazed upward, illuminating the cavern's vaulted roof. Xenomorphs clung there, dozens of them, positioned like gargoyles on a cathedral, biomechanical bodies perfectly still, waiting. They'd gotten ahead of the Fellowship somehow, had taken parallel routes or shortcuts that only creatures who'd transformed this mountain into their hive would know. And now, they had the high ground. Run, Gandalf said, not loud, not panicked, just a simple command. They ran. The xenomorphs dropped, not all at once. That would have been almost merciful. Instead, they came in waves. 3 dropped ahead of the Fellowship, cutting off forward progress. 4 dropped behind, blocking retreat. 5 more descended on the bridge itself. The Fellowship was trapped on a narrow span of stone with acid-blooded predators and an abyss on either side. Aragorn's sword met the first Xenomorph's claws. The impact nearly drove him backward off the bridge. These creatures were stronger than they looked, stronger than orcs, maybe stronger than trolls. The Xenomorph pressed forward, trying to force him into the abyss. Aragorn didn't try to match strength with strength. He sidestepped, let the creature's momentum carry it past, and drove Andúril into its back. The blade punched through chitin between shoulder plates and into the spine beyond. The Xenomorph collapsed. Acid blood pooled. Aragorn had to jump over the spreading puddle, nearly lost his balance on the narrow bridge, caught himself at the last second. Boromir faced 2 Xenomorphs simultaneously. His shield caught the first one's strike. His sword stabbed at the second's face. The creature dodged with serpentine flexibility, coiled its tail around his leg and pulled. Boromir went down hard on the bridge. The Xenomorph loomed over him, secondary jaw extending, ready to punch through his skull. Legolas's arrow took it in the side of the head. The creature reeled. Boromir rolled, came up with his sword and drove it through the thing's throat. 2 dead. Acid-eating pits in the ancient bridge, and more Xenomorphs descending. Gimli fought with his back to the abyss, his axe singing. Every swing was committed, every strike final. He couldn't afford precision or technique, just raw power and dwarven fury. A Xenomorph lunged. Gimli's axe caught it mid-leap, buried in its chest. The creature's momentum carried both of them toward the edge. Gimli's feet left the bridge. For one terrible moment he was falling, the Xenomorph's corpse still impaled on his axe, the abyss opening beneath him. Legolas grabbed his arm. The elf's grip was iron despite his slender build. He pulled, strained, muscles standing out on his arms. Gimli came back onto the bridge, dropped the Xenomorph's corpse into the abyss and gasped, "I owe you a life debt, elf." "We'll discuss terms later," Legolas said, already knocking another arrow. The hobbits huddled in the center of the bridge, forming a defensive square around Frodo. Sam had Sting out. Merry and Pippin held their swords with hands that barely trembled. When a Xenomorph got past Boromir and came at them, they met it together. Sam stabbed low at its legs. Merry went for its tail as it whipped past. Pippin, showing more courage than sense, jumped on its back and drove his sword down through its elongated skull. The Xenomorph thrashed, nearly threw Pippin off the bridge. But the hobbit held on, his sword buried in chitin and brain, riding the creature like a bucking horse until it collapsed. Then Pippin jumped off, landed badly, rolled, and came up covered in acid burns but alive. "Took that one from your book, Gimli," he shouted. "Well fought, lad," Gimli roared back. Gandalf stood at the front of the bridge, his staff raised high, speaking words that echoed with power beyond language. Lightning crackled from the staff's tip, struck a Xenomorph mid-leap and hurled it into the abyss. Thunder boomed, the bridge shook, and from below, from the depths, came an answering roar. Not Xenomorph, something older, deeper, full of fire and wrath and ancient hatred. The Balrog was waking. "Gandalf!" Aragorn's warning came too late. The bridge cracked, not from lightning, from heat. From below, magma was rising. The Balrog, roused by thunder and battle, was ascending from its lair for the first time in centuries. "Off the bridge!" Gandalf commanded. "Now!" They ran, the Fellowship and the remaining Xenomorphs all running in the same direction suddenly because the Balrog was a threat to everything. The bridge began to collapse behind them, stones sloughing away into molten rock that bubbled up from the abyss. They reached the far side, dove through a doorway. Behind them, the bridge fell section by section into fire and shadow, and rising from that fire came the Balrog. It was massive, twice the height of a man, wreathed in flame and shadow that flickered between corporeal and incorporeal. Its body seemed to be made of molten rock and solidified darkness, constantly shifting between states. In one hand it gripped a whip of fire, in the other a sword that burned with heat that could be felt from 100 feet away. Durin's Bane, the terror that had ended the greatest dwarven civilization in Middle-earth's history. It looked at the Fellowship with eyes like volcanic vents. Then it looked at the Xenomorphs still clinging to the cavern walls. The Xenomorphs, for the first time since the Fellowship had encountered them, hesitated. These creatures feared nothing, had no survival instinct beyond attacking and breeding, but even they recognized something in the Balrog. Something primal, something that came from ages when the world was young and terrible. Things walked openly under sun and stars. The Balrog's whip cracked. The sound was thunder and breaking stone. A xenomorph lunged at it. The whip caught the creature midair, wrapped around its biomechanical body and squeezed. The xenomorph shrieked. Its acid blood sprayed. The acid hit the Balrog's flame-wreathed body and hissed, evaporated, did nothing. The Balrog was too hot. The acid boiled away before it could burn. The Balrog threw the xenomorph against the wall hard enough to shatter chitin. The creature fell, twitching. The demon turned to face the others. The xenomorphs attacked en masse, a dozen of them swarming the Balrog like ants on a beetle, climbing its body, striking with claws and teeth and secondary jaws, trying to tear it apart through sheer numbers and ferocity. The Balrog laughed. The sound was grinding stone and volcanic eruption. It ignited. Flames erupted from its body in a sphere of incandescent heat. The xenomorphs caught in the blast shrieked and burned. Their chitin, designed to withstand vacuum and acid and physical trauma, couldn't withstand fire at temperatures that melted rock. They fell away, carbonized and dead, but some survived. And where their acid blood had struck the Balrog's body, even boiling away, mostly it had left marks. Small wounds, cracks in the molten stone flesh. The Balrog bled magma, and it was angry. "We need to go," Gandalf said urgently. "Now, while they're focused on each other." "You're not going to help?" Gimli asked. "It's killing the xenomorphs. And if it finishes, we're next. The Balrog doesn't distinguish prey. Everything that lives in its domain dies. Move." They fled through corridors that were warming rapidly from the Balrog's presence. Behind them, the sounds of battle continued. Xenomorph shrieks, the crack of flame whips, the roar of the demon and the hiss of acid. "How far to the eastern gate?" Aragorn asked between breaths. 2 days, Gimli replied. "If the roads are clear." "They won't be," Legolas said. "I can hear more xenomorphs. They're converging on the battle, drawn by the noise or by pheromone signals or something." "Then we use that," Boromir said. "Let them fight the Balrog. Let them thin each other out." "And if the xenomorphs win?" Sam asked. "They won't," Gandalf said with certainty. "The Balrog is a Maya, a spirit of the Ainur clothed in flesh of flame. These creatures, whatever they are still biological, flesh and chitin. The Balrog will burn through them eventually." "And then come for us," Frodo finished. "Yes." They ran deeper into Moria, following corridors that grew less resin-coated as they descended. This deep, even the xenomorphs hadn't fully colonized. Too close to the Balrog's lair, too hot. But that same heat was making breathing difficult. The air was thick and dry and tasted of sulfur. They emerged into a massive chamber that Gimli recognized with dawning horror. The Chamber of Light, where the heart of the mithril vein was discovered. This is the deepest the dwarves ever mined. The chamber was cathedral vast, its walls glittering with veins of mithril that caught Gandalf's light and reflected it 1,000-fold. Beautiful, priceless, and completely transformed. The resin here was different, thicker, more organized. It formed structures that looked almost architectural, chambers within chambers, passages and alcoves, and at the center, on a platform that the dwarves had carved for viewing the vein, was something that made the entire fellowship stop cold. The Queen. She was enormous, 20 feet long. Her body was an obscene fusion of biomechanical horror and insectoid breeding efficiency. Her head was elongated like the drones, but crowned with a chitinous crest that swept back like a hood. Her body was segmented, powerful, designed for both combat and egg-laying. And behind her, attached to her body, was a massive ovipositor, a biological organ constantly pulsing, constantly producing eggs that dropped into resin cradles where worker xenomorphs tended them. Around her were warriors. Not the drones they'd fought before. These were larger, more heavily armored. Their chitin was thicker, their heads more pronounced. Elite guards protecting their queen. And the Queen was intelligent, truly, terrifyingly intelligent. When the Fellowship entered the chamber, her massive head turned toward them. She saw them, analyzed them, and made a decision. She shrieked. The sound was a psychic weapon. It bypassed ears and struck directly at primitive brainstems, triggering flight responses coded in prey species for millions of years. The hobbits clapped hands over their ears and screamed. Boromir staggered. Even Gandalf winced. The warrior xenomorphs charged. "Form up," Aragorn commanded, but his voice was lost in the Queen's shrieking. The warriors hit the Fellowship like a wave. These weren't drones testing prey. These were soldiers defending their hive. Each one was faster than the drones, stronger, more aggressive. They fought with coordination that suggested tactical thinking. Two went for Gandalf simultaneously. The wizard's staff blazed, driving them back. But they didn't flee. They circled, looking for openings, working together. Three targeted Boromir and Aragorn. The two rangers of Gondor and Arnor fought back to back, their blades singing. They'd fought together before in different places, different battles, but always against orcs or bandits or natural predators. This was different. The xenomorphs didn't fight like anything in Middle-earth. They struck from impossible angles, used their tails as whips and their claws as grappling hooks. Fought with no regard for injury or death, only focused on killing prey. Boromir's sword took one through the head. It fell, acid blood eating into his boots. He had to scramble back, nearly stumbled, would have fallen if Aragorn hadn't caught him. "Can't hold them," Boromir gasped. "We don't need to hold," Aragorn shouted back. "We need to run." "Where?" Boromir gestured at the chamber, one entrance behind them. The Queen blocking the only other exit, warriors everywhere. "Through," Gandalf said. He planted his staff, spoke a word. The staff exploded with light so bright it was painful, so bright that even the eyeless xenomorphs recoiled. In that moment of blindness, Gandalf pointed at the Queen. "She's the key! Kill her and the hive collapses!" "That's a mad plan!" Gimli shouted, but he was already charging, his axe raised, roaring dwarven war cries. The Fellowship followed, because what choice did they have? Trapped in the deepest chamber of Moria with a xenomorph queen and her guards, and an awakening Balrog somewhere behind them. Forward was the only direction that might lead to survival. The warrior xenomorphs tried to intercept them. Legolas put arrows through their heads as fast as he could draw. Boromir and Aragorn cut a path with sword and shield. Gimli battered through anything that got close. The Queen watched them come. Didn't retreat. Didn't call more guards. She just detached from her ovipositor with a wet, organic sound, freeing her body for combat. And then she moved. For something her size, she was impossibly fast. She crossed 30 feet in a heartbeat, her massive tail lashing, her claws extended. She was heading straight for Frodo. The Queen knew. Somehow she recognized that Frodo was important, that protecting him was the Fellowship's priority. She was going to kill him first. Break their morale, then hunt the rest at leisure. Sam stepped in front of Frodo, his little hobbit body between a halfling and a 20-foot alien queen. His sword, Sting, the elf blade that had killed spiders in Mirkwood, held in trembling hands. "No," Sam said. "Simple. Final." The queen's claw came down like a falling tree. Sam raised Sting. The blade intercepted the claw somehow, impossibly, elf magic and dwarven courage meeting alien biology, and held. For half a second, then the claw swept Sting aside and hit Sam full force, sending the hobbit flying 20 feet to crash against the resin-covered wall. "Sam!" Frodo's scream was raw. The queen turned toward him, her secondary jaw extending, ready to punch through his skull and feast on his brain. Gandalf hit her with a blast of pure force, not fire, not lightning, just power. The queen staggered. Her massive body slid backward 3 feet, claws scrabbling for purchase on stone. She turned toward Gandalf, shrieked. The sound was fury and challenge and recognition. This prey was dangerous. This prey needed to die first. She charged Gandalf. The wizard stood his ground, his staff blazed. Words of power spilled from his lips in Quenya and Sindarin and languages older than both. Tongues spoken when the world was young and the Ainur walked openly. The queen hit him like a battering ram. Gandalf flew backward, his staff clattering away, his gray robes smoldering where her claws had torn through them. He hit the ground hard, rolled, tried to rise. The queen loomed over him. Her secondary jaw shot forward. Aragorn's sword intercepted it. Andúril, reforged from Narsil, Blade of Kings, met the biological piston of muscle and tooth and somehow held. The secondary jaw's teeth scraped against elf-forged steel, searching for flesh, finding none. Aragorn strained against the force. The queen was stronger, far stronger. She pushed forward and Aragorn's feet began to slide backward on the stone floor. Boromir hit her from the side. His shield slammed into her elongated head with enough force to dent the shield's steel. The queen's head snapped sideways. Her secondary jaw retracted reflexively. Aragorn rolled away, grabbed Gandalf, pulled the wizard to his feet. The queen turned to face Boromir, studied him. This prey was strong, dangerous, but not as dangerous as the wizard. She made her choice. Spun. Focused on Gandalf again, and from the tunnel behind them, lit by volcanic fire, came the Balrog. The demon emerged into the chamber of light and stopped. Its flame dimmed slightly, not in fear, but in recognition. It saw the queen, saw the hive she'd built in what had been its domain. Saw that this chamber, the deepest hall of Moria, had been claimed by something that wasn't orcs or dwarves or any creature that belonged in its mountain. The Balrog roared. The sound was primal rage, territorial fury, the challenge of an apex predator that had just discovered another predator in its hunting grounds. The queen answered with her own shriek. Her warriors moved to flank her. The eggs around the chamber began to open, facehuggers emerging, adding to the defense. And the Fellowship stood in the middle of it all. "Well," Gimli said into the moment of silence before the storm, "this is bad." Then the ancient evils charged each other, and the Fellowship dove for whatever cover they could find as fire and acid and claws and shadow turned the Chamber of Light into a war zone. The Balrog's whip cracked across the chamber, struck the queen across her chitinous crest, and left a glowing welt of superheated metal. The queen shrieked and lunged, her massive claws raking across the Balrog's body. Where her claws struck, the demon's flesh of flame and shadow cracked. Where her acid blood splashed, it hissed and steamed, but didn't fully evaporate. She was hurting it. The warrior xenomorphs swarmed the Balrog's legs. Their acid blood pooled around its feet. The stone floor cracked from heat and acid combined. The Balrog kicked out, sending warriors flying. Some hit walls hard enough to shatter their carapaces. Others landed in pools of their own acid and dissolved, but more kept coming. The queen was calling reinforcements. From every tunnel and passage connected to this chamber, more xenomorphs poured in, drones, warriors. Ones that looked different, thicker, heavier, designed for different purposes. The entire hive was mobilizing to defend its queen. And the Balrog was loving it. The demon hadn't had a real fight in centuries, had spent ages sleeping in darkness, occasionally rousing to drive away dwarven miners who delved too deep. This was different. This was war. This was what it had been created for back in the ancient days when Morgoth walked Middle-earth and evil had purpose and power. Its sword came down in an arc that split 3 xenomorphs in half. Fire erupted from its body in waves, carbonizing anything close enough to touch. Its whip lashed out repeatedly, each crack killing or maiming. But the xenomorphs adapted. They learned. The ones in front attacked recklessly, died quickly, and the ones behind observed. Found patterns, discovered that the Balrog's back was less protected, that its whip arm had a recovery time between strikes, that its sword was slow, powerful but slow. They exploited those weaknesses. A warrior leaped onto the Balrog's back. Its secondary jaw shot forward, punched through shadow flesh between what might have been shoulder blades. The Balrog roared, reached back, grabbed the xenomorph and threw it into the queen. The queen caught her warrior gently, remarkable precision for something her size, and set it aside. Then she charged again, using the momentary distraction. Her tail whipped around, caught the Balrog's legs, and pulled. The demon fell. It had stood for 3,000 years without falling, had outlasted kingdoms and civilizations, and a 20-foot alien queen built like a biological tank had just swept its legs and brought it down. The xenomorphs piled on. The Balrog erupted, fire exploded outward in a sphere that reached the ceiling. Xenomorphs caught in the blast carbonized instantly. The resin coating the walls caught fire. Eggs burst like overfilled water skins, the facehuggers inside cooking before they could emerge. The queen had thrown herself backward at the last instant. Her chiton was scorched but intact. She shrieked commands and her warriors regrouped, more cautious now. And in the chaos, the Fellowship was trying desperately to not die. They'd found cover behind a cluster of mithril-bearing rocks. Ironically, the veins of precious metal provided shelter from both fire and acid. Gandalf was checking his staff. The wood was cracked but intact. Aragorn was binding wounds. Boromir was watching both titans with the trained eye of a tactician. "They're evenly matched," he observed. "The Balrog has raw power. The Queen has numbers and adaptation. Which means neither will win quickly," Aragorn said. "Which means we're stuck here until one side collapses." "We can't wait," Gandalf said. "The longer this fight continues, the more of the hive mobilizes. Eventually, some xenomorphs will remember we're here. We'll decide that smaller prey is easier prey. So we use the chaos," Gimli said. "Slip past while they're focused on each other." "Past them to where?" Legolas asked. He'd climbed a rock outcropping and was surveying the chamber. "The Queen is blocking the only exit. We'd have to go through her territory." "Or under it," Gimli said slowly. He was examining the floor, his dwarven knowledge of stone and structure coming to the fore. "This chamber, it's built over a cavern, a natural formation that the dwarves discovered during the deep mining. There are shaft entrances along the walls. They lead down to the waterways." "Waterways?" Sam had regained consciousness and was listening despite obvious pain. "You mean rivers?" "Underground rivers that flow toward the eastern mountains. The dwarves used them to transport goods in the early days before they carved the upper roads. If we can reach the waterways, we can follow them to the eastern gate. Days instead of weeks. And these shafts?" Aragorn was already moving toward the nearest wall. "Where?" Gimli pointed. "There, behind the Queen's position, and there, 5 entrances, all leading down. So we need to get past a 20-foot alien queen and her army. Boromir summarized, while she's fighting a fire demon. In a chamber that's being progressively destroyed by fire and acid, this is your plan. You have a better one? Boromir thought. No. Then we go, Gandalf said, quickly, quietly. We use every piece of cover. A warrior xenomorph appeared from behind their rock cluster. It had circled around during the chaos. Saw them, shrieked. Legolas's arrow took it through the head before the shriek finished, but the damage was done. The queen's massive head turned toward them. Her intelligent eyes, not human intelligence, but something else, something alien but real, fixed on them. She remembered. These prey had invaded her hive, had killed her children, had disrupted her breeding. And now they were trying to escape. The queen shrieked. 5 warriors detached from the swarm, attacking the Balrog, and moved toward the fellowship. Run! Gandalf commanded. They ran, not toward the exit. That way was blocked. Instead, they ran along the chamber's edge, using the mithril deposits as cover, heading for the nearest shaft entrance. The warriors pursued, fast, relentless, closing the distance. Legolas ran backward, firing arrows with inhuman speed. 4 shots, 4 warriors down, but the 5th kept coming. Gimli turned to face it, planted his feet. Keep going, I'll hold it. Gimli, go! The warrior hit him like a charging bull. Gimli's axe met its head in mid-leap. The blade cracked, chitin. The warrior's claws raked across his armor, leaving gouges. Its tail whipped around, wrapped around his leg. Gimli roared and brought the axe down again. And again. And again. The warrior's skull shattered. It collapsed. Acid blood sprayed across Gimli's armor, eating through metal, burning skin beneath. Legolas grabbed him, pulled him away from the spreading pool of acid. You dwarves are insane. It's why you love us. They reached the shaft entrance. It was a vertical drop, a mining shaft that descended into darkness. They could hear water far below, rushing water. How far? Aragorn asked. 60 feet, Gimli guessed. Maybe more. That's death if we fall wrong. It's death if we stay. Behind them, the queen was moving. Not toward the Balrog anymore. Toward them. She'd decided. The demon was dangerous but stationary. These prey were fleeing. And she couldn't allow that. Couldn't allow anything to escape her hive alive. It was biological imperative. Territorial instinct coded deep. We jump, Gandalf decided. On 3. Wait, Sam started. 1! The queen charged, massive body accelerating, warriors flanking her. 2. The Balrog, seeing its enemy distracted, swung its burning sword. The blade caught the queen across her side, cut deep, magma-hot metal cleaving through chitin and flesh. The queen shrieked in pain and fury, spun, slashed at the Balrog with her good arm while her tail wrapped around its weapon arm. 3. The fellowship jumped into darkness. The fall was terror. Nothing but void and air and the certainty of death if they hit wrong. Frodo felt the ring burning against his chest, heard it whispering, "Use me. Fly. Escape." He didn't. He fell with his friends, into darkness, into water. The impact was brutal. Cold water at high speed felt like hitting stone. Frodo's vision went white with pain, then dark with depth. He was sinking, couldn't tell which way was up. His lungs screamed. Something grabbed his collar, pulled. Sam, his faithful Sam, somehow keeping them both from drowning despite his wounds and exhaustion and terror. They broke the surface, gasped air. Around them, the others were surfacing. Gandalf's staff provided dim light. The water was fast-moving, pulling them along an underground river that rushed through a tunnel carved by water and time. "Let it take you," Gandalf called. "Don't fight the current, it flows east." They let go, let the river carry them. Behind them, far above, they could still hear the sounds of battle. The queen's shrieks, the Balrog's roars, the hiss of acid and crack of flame. And then the sound faded, the river turned, and they were alone in darkness and rushing water, being carried toward an unknown destination by currents carved before the sun first rose. "Is everyone alive?" Aragorn called. A chorus of affirmatives, wounded, exhausted, terrified, but alive. "Where does this lead?" Boromir asked Gimli. "East, eventually, if the old maps were accurate. And if they weren't, then we drown in darkness and at least die free of acid and fire." The river rushed on. Hours passed. The water was cold enough to numb extremities. The darkness was absolute except for Gandalf's staff. The sound of rushing water filled everything, made conversation impossible. And slowly, the Fellowship began to see light ahead. Not staff light, natural light, gray and cold and beautiful. Dawn. They were carried toward it. The river widened, slowed, became almost gentle. And ahead, the tunnel opened into open air. The Fellowship was carried out of Moria on a river that had been old when the dwarves first delved. They washed up on a rocky shore under a gray sky that looked like paradise after 3 days in darkness. They lay on stone and breathed free air and didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Gimli broke the silence. "We're alive." "Against all sense and reason," Legolas agreed. "Gandalf?" Frodo's voice was weak. Did we complete the crossing?" Gandalf pulled himself into a sitting position, checked his staff, cracked but still functional, checked his body, whole mostly, checked the Fellowship, wounded but alive. "We survived Moria," he said. "That's more than most can say." "And the Xenomorphs?" Sam asked. "The Queen? Will they—" "The Balrog was winning when we left," Gandalf said. "Fire versus biology. Fire wins eventually. The Queen may be dead already, or she may have retreated to the deepest chambers. Either way, Moria is a tomb now, for dwarves and demons and alien horrors alike." "We need to seal it," Gimli said. His face was hard. "Every entrance, every shaft, we seal it permanently." "Agreed," Gandalf said. "I will send word to Lothlorien, to Rivendell, to every kingdom. Moria must be sealed and watched, if even one xenomorph escapes." He didn't finish. They all knew. If even one escaped and found new hosts, the cycle would begin again. In 30 years, another mountain could be a hive. In 60, 3 mountains. Exponential growth until Middle-earth was consumed by an alien species that didn't hate, didn't choose evil, just consumed and reproduced and perfected itself endlessly. "The ring," Frodo said suddenly. He pulled it out, looked at it in the gray dawn light. "It was whispering to me down there, telling me to use it, to escape, to save myself." "And you didn't," Sam said proudly. "No, because I realized something." Frodo looked at Gandalf. "The ring is evil, but it's evil with purpose, with intelligence, with will. The xenomorphs, they're not evil. They're just hungry, and somehow that's worse." Gandalf nodded slowly. "Evil can be fought with good. Evil can be reasoned with, appealed to, sometimes even redeemed. But nature, biology, hunger, those are forces beyond morality. The xenomorphs don't serve Sauron. They don't serve anyone. They just are. And yes, that is worse. So we have 2 quests now," Aragorn said. "Destroy the ring, and make sure Moria stays sealed." "Can we do both?" Merry asked. "We have to," Gandalf said. "Because if we fail at either one, Middle-earth falls. Different ends, perhaps. Sauron's tyranny or xenomorph consumption, but both are extinction." They rested on that rocky shore for an hour, tended wounds, ate what little food remained, planned the rest of their journey, and one by one they looked back at the mountains. At Moria's eastern gate, barely visible in the distance. At the tomb that held 3,000 years of dwarven history and 30 years of alien horror. "My people," Gimli said quietly. "All those dwarves, 400 souls. What happened to their bodies? Are they still in the hive? The Balrog's fire will have destroyed much, Gandalf said. The Queen's acid will have dissolved more. What remains? He shook his head. There's nothing left to recover, Gimli. I'm sorry. Then I'll remember them, Gimli said. Every name, every face, every deed. I'll remember that they died trying to reclaim our ancestral home and were used by something that shouldn't exist in Arda. I'll remember, and I'll make sure their deaths meant something. They did mean something, Frodo said. They warned us. Without Balin's expedition, without their letters stopping, without Nolly's journal, we would have walked into that hive blind. They saved us, even in death. Gimli nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. They left an hour after dawn. 9 souls who'd entered Moria and somehow emerged. 9 souls who'd seen things that would haunt their dreams forever. 9 souls who carried the knowledge that the world contained horrors beyond evil, beyond corruption, beyond anything the wise could have predicted. And behind them, sealed in stone and darkness, the xenomorphs remained. Some dead, some wounded, some hibernating, waiting, patient. As they'd waited in their meteor for millennia before the dwarves released them. They could wait longer. They always had. 3 months later, in Lothlorien, the Lady Galadriel received a messenger from the dwarven kingdom of Erebor. The message was brief. All 7 gates of Moria sealed by order of Dain Ironfoot. Watch maintained. None shall enter. None shall leave. She showed the message to Gandalf, who'd arrived with the fellowship. It's done, then, he said. Is it? Galadriel's eyes saw things others couldn't. She looked toward the mountains. I sensed darkness there still. Not Balrog darkness, something else, something patient. The xenomorphs? Perhaps. Or perhaps just the memory of them. Sometimes the memory of horror is as dangerous as the horror itself. Gandalf thought of the Fellowship's nightmares, of Frodo waking screaming about facehuggers, of Sam's acid scars that would never fully heal, of Gimli's silence whenever anyone mentioned Moria, of the weight they all carried now, knowing what dwelt in the deep places of the world. Yes, he said quietly, sometimes memory is worse. In Rivendell, Elrond updated his libraries, added new entries to the bestiaries, descriptions of creatures called xenomorphs, their biology, their behavior, their threat. He marked the volumes with the highest warnings, locked them in vaults where only the wisest could access them. But knowledge, once recorded, never truly stayed locked. Eventually, someone would read, would wonder, would ask, did they really seal all the entrances? Every shaft? Every crack? In Moria, in the deepest chambers where fire and acid had raged, where the Balrog and the Queen had fought to mutual destruction, something stirred. Not the Queen. She was dead. Her massive body burned and dissolved. Not the Balrog. It had returned to the depths to heal and sleep again. But something smaller. Something that had hidden while Titans warred. An egg. A single egg that had rolled into a crevice during the battle, protected by stone from fire, shielded from acid by chance. The egg began to open. The facehugger inside sensed nothing. No heat signatures, no movement. The hive was dead. The hosts were gone. It could wait. That's what it was designed to do. Wait. Hibernate if necessary. For years, decades, centuries. Eventually, someone would unseal Moria, would think enough time had passed, would believe the danger had faded. Eventually, there would be hosts again. The facehugger settled into hibernation. Patient. Perfect. Waiting for the world to forget that in the deep places, in the dark, some horrors never truly died. They just waited for their next meal.